to do. So let's move into our tech talk. Diana Fissler is joining us today from ADLVentures. Diana is a principal there at ADLVentures, but she is not new to roofing. She's been in the building materials industry in a number of different roles and was most recently the building science and innovation leader at Johns Manville. She delivered new business opportunities in the building space, air sealing, weather barrier, and off-site construction solutions. Before that, she supported the commercial roofing group, and she led a team that delivered solutions for EPDM, TPO, polyiso, and their asphalt products. She earned her PhD in geophysics from Penn State University, go Penn State, and currently contributes her expertise to a number of organizations and committees like ASHRAE and ASTM. So Diana, oops, sorry, I hit the mouse. I will turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being here today. Diana, you might be muted.
And I might be muted, so.
There you are.
Let me try that again. I'm excited to be here. I love talking to groups like this, and I want to share some things with you all that I hope you'll find interesting, and feel free to reach out to me later. So like Karen said, I used to be at Johns Manville, and after 21 years, I was in an innovation role, but I became interested in doing more of that, deeper innovation, more cutting edge stuff. So I left there and I ended up at a company called ADL. I'm going to talk to you about what ADL does. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about disruptive innovation and how I think we can recognize it coming. And then I'm going to finish up with a new initiative that we're involved with the Department of Energy to ambitiously advance building construction in the U.S. And really take advantage of offsite fabrication and energy efficient construction. So I hope you'll find something of interest in one of these subjects. So ADL is a startup that I landed at shortly after leaving Johns Manville. And the mission is to disrupt and innovate in legacy industries, legacy organizations, without breaking things, without turning everything on its head, to really seamlessly implement innovation and disruption into big companies like a Johns Manville, like an Owens Corning. And we use two models there. One is spin-in, so identifying cutting edge technologies, entrepreneurs, and startups that have the technologies that a legacy sector company, a large company, needs that they haven't been able to find in their normal vendor channels. And I'll touch on this in the next slide. What's challenging about that is everybody looks for new technologies, but entrepreneurs and startups don't speak the same language as large companies. And being able to facilitate that relationship is one of the things we specialize in. And then the other option, the other business product that we offer is spin out. So a company like I said, like an Owens Corning, like a Johns Manville, doesn't really have the resources to form a new business unit. So if they want to go into something new, like say you're in roofing and you'd like to go adjacent to, I don't know, outdoor lighting or something like that, you really don't have the resources to do that. So what we provide is the startup itself, the scaffolding for a company to try out a new business without as much risk as they would going all in. So our entire function is to lower risk for these larger companies, find new revenue sources, increase valuations, and facilitate the creation of innovation within a legacy company. Because they all have their day jobs and they don't really have time to work like a startup does.
Okay.
Next slide.
We had another one that was called mobilization.
Yeah, somebody's talking. If they could mute themselves, that'd be great.
And then
Karen, next slide. There we go. Thank you. And I'll just say this really quickly. You probably know, but startups and corporates really speak different languages. And sometimes they look at each other like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And the relationship between entrepreneurs and legacy companies can often fall apart without the real promise of innovation being realized, because they have different expectations, they have different energies, different timelines. The entrepreneurs don't understand things like codes and how long it takes to qualify a new product. The legacy companies don't understand the entrepreneurs, big talk. And so with my background and with my partners' entrepreneurship at ADL, we work to be those translators. Next. And I was first attracted to this because there is a successful case history in their background that's in the building material space. The company works with utilities and a lot of other things. But ADL, before I joined them, worked with Stowe. They do EIFs. And they were not finding the fire-resistant building materials that they needed. So a totally incombustible insulation product that performs like an EPS or an XPS. So ADL ran a building materials challenge and received more than 400 applicants with new technologies that they thought would meet this need, and then sorted through them, vetted them, made sure they weren't nonsense. Some entrepreneurs bring you things that just won't work. And in the end, there were 3 funded opportunities for entrepreneurs to work with Stowe, and ADL facilitated that whole process. So when I saw that, I said, okay, so there is a model for really doing this, for really helping stodgy building materials companies like Stowe to find the technologies they need. And so I decided to join on. And this is still a work in progress, to figure out what's the best way of integrating new technologies into the building materials space. Next. So when I say that, a company like, I'm going to stop picking on Johns Manville, a company like Carlisle has trouble innovating, I don't mean to say that they don't know how to innovate in a certain way. What companies like those are very good at is sustaining innovation. So you guys come to them and you say, adhering these seams is too slow, and they come back to you with pre-taped seams. They come back to you with a better fastener type. And the best companies are really terrific at that, where the customer knows that they have a problem. The company listens to the customer. The innovation has to do with improving performance, lowering costs, making an incremental change in the system that's already there. And hopefully all of your supplier companies are doing a good job at meeting your needs in sustaining innovation in the roofing space. Another key part of that is that traditional business methods are already in place and are sufficient, that the company's finding the right customers, listening to those customers and meeting their needs. What's a lot tougher is to recognize when disruptive innovation is either possible or about to happen to you. And this is when there's a problem that's not well understood, or there's a new market, or the market has changed dramatically for some reason, and the customer doesn't even know how to handle it. I'm going to use kind of an ugly example of a disruption from the past. Johns Manville was the world leader in asbestos. When asbestos was recognized to be a health hazard, it upended that entire industry, and new, not just technologies, but business methods had to come along. Otherwise, in fact, the company did end up in bankruptcy. So that's an example of a fairly unattractive disruption. What we'd like to identify are opportunities for disruption that perhaps were more positive and that we could take advantage of and really change things for the good. Next. So I'd like to modestly propose that there's a way to see disruption coming and take advantage of it. And you have to bear with me because once in a while this sounds a little wacky, but it's a good thought experiment for figuring out where there's an opportunity for you either to be disrupted or to disrupt yourselves. So I'm going to ask you to think about this. Suppose that you are an airline, and airlines all day long, they think what they sell is the ability for people to fly, right? As if people business travelers just love flying on airplanes. But what their customers actually want, when you think about it, is the ability to close a business deal in person, the ability to contact with a customer, right? So when you think about it from that point of view, not the point of view of what you sell, but the point of view of what does your customer value, sometimes things look a lot different. And then you can answer the question, what else could meet that need? And if video conferencing ever became really good, and we're all right in the middle of a giant experiment around video conferencing, what if it was just as good as having a drink in the bar with your potential customer? What if it was virtual enough that you could get that done? Suddenly business travel would be a lot less attractive and airlines could be significantly disrupted. I'm not saying that's happening today. What I'm saying is when you recognize what the customer wants, you have the opportunity to recognize disruption. So then I used another example in building materials. And I thought about this a lot when I was at Johns Manville. What do I think I sell? Fiberglass. But does anybody actually want fiberglass? Like, it's not fun. You don't like decorate your house with it. What people really are buying, either through codes or through their own choice, is to not waste money on energy for heating and cooling, to not just throw that away, right? When you could passively stop it. What could disrupt that? Well, if you had free energy, if you didn't have to pay for it because you had renewables everywhere and really good energy storage, suddenly the equation for not wasting money on energy in your home looks a lot different. And the value proposition for fiberglass insulation becomes way less compelling. So then I'm going to ask you, as roofers, as roofing people, your business is roofing, you think you sell roofs, but what do people actually buy? And you might have a lot of different answers to this. This is the one I just came up with. And I'd say they want to protect their stuff, right? They don't want it to get rained on and ruined. So then please do this thought experiment with me. What else could provide it? And I know it sounds crazy, like what if there was no weather? Well, that's probably pretty stupid. People still need roofs, right? But long term, do they still need roofers? What if robots were just as efficient at putting roofs on as roofers were? That could be disruptive. So then we have to think to ourselves, in that case, what do we really provide in roofing? Do we provide the best solution for what people want? And that's just a fun experiment I like to do with myself in different areas to try to think about how I could do things differently and how I might disrupt myself. So that's it for innovation. And now I'd like to move on to tell you a little bit about the Advanced Building Collaborative. And I'm going to check my time really quick. I'm good. So the Department of Energy recently issued a fairly big grant to the Rocky Mountain Institute in Colorado and to ADL to advance building construction in the United States. And so next slide. What I'm going to talk about is there anything wrong with the US built environment, and why is a collaborative necessary? And I'm going to tell you a little bit about this collaborative that we've just formed. Next. So what's wrong with the built environment right now? We're all employed, everything looks pretty good, right? But, next slide. You're probably already aware of this, but there is a problem in the US built environment. And we've got, the productivity compared to other industries is not growing. I mean, agriculture is beating us, and they're not even all that sophisticated. So, what needs to be done to improve the productivity and to bring the built environment construction into line with other industries? The other problem from the point of view of the Department of Energy, as they're very concerned with energy efficiency and energy usage, is that the turnover in building stock is pretty small. Now in roofing we have, at least in commercial roofing, we have an opportunity to improve energy efficiency when we re-roof, but it's not the same story for existing walls. So there's a dual problem there, and the Department of Energy has decided to address it directly by a coordinated effort to advance building construction, sponsored again by the Department of Energy. So I'll tell you a little bit more about it. Next. So the problem is that because there's a labor shortage, because productivity is not keeping up with other industries, we're actually seeing importing of prefab building elements from overseas. And this is actually a real threat to US and North American production. We used to think that it wouldn't make sense from a shipping point of view to import building components from overseas, but in fact, we've seen a number of high-profile buildings with components built in China and Poland. And if this continues, if we don't increase our own productivity, a lot of building components will be made overseas, which threatens US construction jobs. Next. Karen, there we go. So how would a collaborative fix this? The Department of Energy sent out a call and they said, we've got to do something. We want to form a collaborative. Next. So in general, the approach is to bring everyone together who's involved in the decisions in making buildings. The building owners, the builders, the land developers themselves, tradespeople like roofers and plumbing contractors and things like that, GCs, people who finance the buildings, people who insure, AHJs, and make sure that everyone gets a seat at the table to say, let's all work together to lower the barriers to increasing building efficiency and building construction productivity. Next. So the entire concept was predicated on a collaborative back in the 80s that was formed to save the US semiconductor industry. So competition at that time from Japanese conglomerates bankrupted the US semiconductor industry in the 80s. And so Intel went to the Reagan administration and said, you have to do something or semiconductors will not be made in America anymore. And so they actually formed a collaborative called Semitech, and it truly saved the American semiconductor industry. And so there is a precedent for this, and that is what was the original impetus for thinking, can we do the same in building construction? Next. So you're saying, oh, there's a lot of words, Diana. What is this collaborative actually going to do? Next. I'm not going to go into this one in too much depth, but it's basically to address market failures, but also to encourage free market competition. We don't want to turn building construction in the US into a government program. What we want to do is pull everybody together to cooperate, collaborate, to reduce barriers to improving efficiency. We want to create teams to have everybody working together to make efficient and productive buildings. We want to look at codes and standardize on codes and practices. And we also, not really a side, but a key element of this is to deliver new technologies that the national labs are developing around the built environment and actually get them to market. Because right now, they spend a lot of time developing new whiz-bang technologies that never really get implemented because they don't understand the market. So our entire goal with this collaborative is really to bring together the people who know how things work on the ground, the people who influence the decisions, and the smart researchers at the national labs, and together find a way to bring innovative technologies to the building envelope. Next. So, well, here's how we're going to pull the pieces together. It's a platform for growing supply and improving delivery, for generating demand from builders, and to informing policy. Click. Again. So on the growing supply, we want to help incubate disruptors, so people who have disruptive technologies like entrepreneurs and national lab folks. We want to support transfer of those technologies to the market. Click. On the generate demand side, we want to make sure that builders can choose those new technologies, including new technologies for energy efficiency, but also offsite fabrication of components. And click. We want to inform policy by creating codes and standards and practices for advanced building construction. Next. I do not choose to talk about this one very much because it's not very interesting. Next. Just a couple of things on this one. The collaborative is focused on new construction, but also retrofit. There's a big existing stock of buildings that are not very energy efficient, and there are not a lot of good technologies for addressing walls, as I said. You know, we have more luxury in the roofing area. Our first market segments are going to be larger scale, repeatable unit buildings like multifamily and hotels, hospitality, medical buildings, things like that. And like I said, we've identified that we really want everybody who could potentially influence US building construction in the room. We don't want to ignore anybody that potentially could have useful information and influence that from being in the room and having their voice heard. Next. A little bit of animation, it's okay. So I want to leave you with a little bit of a teaser on some of the technologies that are in the national labs that I thought might interest those of us that are involved in roofing. And these are the things that they're working on. They're really good in the lab, but how are they going to implement them in the field? And the collaborative hopes to really make these practical technologies. So what is vacuum panels? I don't know if you guys have talked about them in past tech talks, but these are super high insulating panels that provides in some cases up to R60 per inch. And if properly designed and implemented, they can be used in very space constrained places because they can provide so much R value for so thin. There's panel retrofits. So, you know, there are systems where you can just come along with a full panel with, you know, facade on top and just slap it on the existing building and make it refreshed and new and energy efficient. The same can be done with roof panels. Imagine, I don't know, a roof panel that already has solar PV installed on it and already has you know, the shingles or the membrane on it. There's some very interesting desiccant membrane cooling technologies out there that could be incorporated into roofing. And there's some projects going on at the national labs with pre-installed sealants for bringing panels together. So I would ask you to imagine how we might implement some of those solutions in roofing and in the building envelope. And that is where I will stop. And I would love to have a conversation about what you're thinking.
So Diana, I had a question from Josh. I think Josh Kelly from OMG Roofing Products. And I think that you touched on there a little bit at the end. He sent this earlier. He was curious as to the innovations that you're seeing that excite you. Mm-hmm. And where do you see the roofing industry missing the mark? Well,
roofing is fantastic, by the way. But I think one of the, you know, the biggest challenge is what the entire industry has, which is labor, right? There's not enough people to do the jobs. There's not enough, you know, young people coming into the industry. So what are we going to do there? How do we make ourselves more efficient? So anything having to do with reducing labor has got to be, you know, forefront for us. So I know it seems like a scary proposition, but I think, you know, pre-made components, pre-made panels. In roofing, in residential, we've been using roofing trusses for a long time. Can we do more? Can we pre-install more parts? Now that doesn't really address retrofit unless you want to slap a new panel over top of the existing roof. But I'm a big fan of doing things in a factory because then we can move from a craftsperson mindset to a more industrial mindset and really like start to automate a lot of things and do things in a more lean and efficient way. So that's what I think about a lot. And I think there's a lot more opportunities for like advanced sealants and sealing technologies like self-healing sealants. I've seen a lot in the building wall in walls around, you know, air sealing technologies that sort of install themselves? Are there other technologies in roofing where things install themselves? Like instead of a pre-tape seam, is there a way to get the roof to roll itself out and like seal itself? Things like that. I know that sounds crazy, but when you start thinking about, okay, that vision is crazy, but what about a step in that direction? And that's what I spend a lot of my time thinking about.
Another question was specific to the ABC Collaborative. How much leverage do they have on influencing the early adoption of new materials versus code requirements? Meaning, is there the capacity to move codes forward in a more strategy-specific or prescriptive way? Because codes present a significant hurdle to market adoption.
Yeah, Joanne, you're so right. One of the reasons that, you know, Japan and Sweden have had an off-site construction industry for over 30 years is because they have national codes and we don't have national codes. And even like the codes that we have are kind of a fragmented mess in many cases, right? There's a lot of special interests in there and that kind of thing. I'm going to have to tell you, Joanne, that that's still a work in progress. There's a little bit of controversy as to whether the federal government should really be in the business of influencing codes. But, you know, there's a national HUD code, right, for manufactured housing. Why can't we have a national code, for example, for prefabricated elements, just for that? So we do intend to tackle, you know, inspections and, you know, and providing at least code officials with the ability to evaluate new materials and new processes more easily. So it is part of the scope. And if any ideas or influence that any of this audience has, I would love to hear about it.
Thank you, Diana. Sorry, Joanne, I attributed your question to Josh, but Joanne is the reason that we discovered Diana. She introduced her to us. Joanne is the RT3 member behind Mycocycle, which she did a tech talk for us previously on that technology, which is on our YouTube channel. And she also was a guest on the RT3 podcast, the most recent episode. Anybody else have any other questions out there? We probably could get in one or two more. Turn on your camera or put it in the chat. While we're waiting for that. Oh, sure.
Well, and I don't know if this is a question as much, Diana, as something that I just totally glommed onto during what you were talking about, but was that disruptor model. How do we take something, you know, that I love the airline example. You know, what do they think they're doing? They think they're flying people cross country or to different locations. Whereas why am I getting on an airplane? To close a deal. And can I do that other ways? And we're seeing that right now. So huge. I would love for us to maybe talk, you know, more about not just roofing, but just maybe parts of roofing. How can we disrupt? That's really what this group is about. And so I don't know if that's a question, but I'd love some more of your thoughts on that.
Right. I think it's a really powerful analogy. Actually, the chief counsel for regulatory affairs at Johns Manville was the one who told me that story originally. He was on an airplane and he read in the in-flight magazine that United or whoever saw Oracle as a competitor. And he said, what? How are they a competitor to an airline? And it just totally turned his thinking upside down. And when he told me that, it turned my thinking upside down, right? And so, yeah, I think that's the thing. And another example, I thought of tile. Tile and stone. Why do people buy tile and stone? Well, the tile people think they buy it. People buy it because it's durable and it's easy to care for. I think the reason people buy tile is to feel richer than their neighbors, to feel wealthy and snooty. And when maybe that's not true, but when you start to think of it that way, you start to think of adjacencies. And I think that's really critical. So I think that's the thing is like, okay, why do people buy fasteners for roofing? Why do people, you know what I mean? And then ask yourself, is there another thing that can do this job? And
I'm going to take that exercise back to my team. I'm actually going to make this a fun thing and have and pick a couple things and as a team activity kind of work through that just to kind of expand our thinking for our business. So thank you. I love that.
Yeah.
Heidi,
I love the question.
Sorry, Diana.
I love the comment in the chat, so I want to call our attention to it. Asking Alexa, what's the likelihood of my roof leaking? I was actually backpacking this weekend, and I talked for like 2 hours about what could disrupt roofs with my backpacking companion, right? What if Alexa knew when your roof was going to leak, and that's the only time that you rolled over a roof, and the rest of the time you didn't use it? Or what if you moved your house? I know that sounds dumb, but what if you could, or what if you could move the weather when you need to? These are the things, like, once we have the Internet of Things and sensors all over the place, does it change anything for us? Or do we keep doing things the exact same way we have?
Very good question. Did you see Joanne's in there about the QC process and what could be constructed in their warehouses as opposed to the field?
Yeah,
I was just wondering if it doesn't start to change the mindset of contracting. I know the contractor's dilemma is automation, and that it gobbling into the workforce a process, but rather than being threatened by it, maybe starting to harness some of that to consider, lightweight componentization of what could be constructed with oversight and some automation, thinking Leister guns and stuff, and then transport it to site and put together like a puzzle.
Right. I mean, yeah, what could it be done faster and higher quality with less waste? I think that's absolutely the right thing to think about.
Excellent. Heidi, that other, disruptive chart with the airplanes and everything could be a good topic for our breakouts in October, which we'll be talking about. Great. Diana, thank you so much. Feedback was just really interesting, and we're excited that you were able to share that. I had no idea that any of this was going on behind the scenes, so to speak. You guys are doing great stuff.